Hello, I'm Meghann Scully and welcome to Re-Energize, a show that looks at sustainability in all its forms and what we can do to shape a clean energy future. On this episode, we're looking at hope and activism and changing the world. How do we build a better planet as individuals, organisations and communities? Big topics. I'm here with producer Connor.
Hi, Meghann.
And we had two great guests on this episode who can help navigate these complex conundrums. Dr. Tara Shine is an advisor on climate and sustainability, a public speaker, TV presenter and author. Sharon McManus is the group head of sustainability at ESB.
So, Meghann, this was an episode with lots of big questions, big ideas about, how to change the world, but also one that was very much with small solutions, was kind of looking at very, very small steps that people can take kind of individually and as businesses and everything else, which I thought was really practical.
Yeah, because I think it's so easy to get so overwhelmed by all of this and you kind of almost forget where to start or how to start. And I think here we got really practical advice that's like, all right, okay, do you know what? I can do this at home. I can start with this little steps and I can hopefully then build from that, which I think it just gives everyone that kind of hope and does take away that kind of scaremongering factor.
Yeah, like Tara was talking a little bit about hope and about how that kind of drives change. And we looked before about using comedy and the arts for that in our episode on that. And there's definite kind of overlap there. And then Sharon, who has this really amazing story of kind of going from being in the Defence Forces to working on sustainability there and then through to ESB and everything else. But then she also has done all sorts of work on kind of energy communities in her own community.
Fascinating story. I honestly, just listening to the career she's had to date, and as you mentioned, the years, like 2 decades with the Defence Forces, and how she was able to bring that into ESB, and as you mentioned, her local community as well. And it actually gave me a lot of, food for thought on what we can do in our small towns and villages in rural Ireland, because they are putting in really great change. And I just think, again, it's like we just have to get people. If you just get a few people together in a room, maybe a cup of coffee, you can do really great things.
Yeah. And that was really her advice. And then we kind of talked to an energy community in Dingle as well for one of our other episodes, which kind of tied in that. And she had lots of really good advice about how to get started. So will we start with Tara then?
Now, Tara, it's great to have you with us. So let's get straight into it. Can you tell us about the work you do and the activism?
Yeah, so lovely to meet you, Meghann. The work I do is all around getting people engaged with sustainability. And I guess it's been like that for lots and lots of years, but in many, many different ways. So I used to work internationally on climate change and sustainability through international development and in the UN and through the UN climate negotiations. So very much at that kind of top international level, that kind of finally trickles down into everybody's lives. And now I work more so with people as employees within companies and organizations and helping them to build their sustainability awareness and inspiration and motivation to be part of helping the business that they work with, the organization they work with, be more sustainable.
You must have seen incredible changes over the 20 years working in the area, especially you said you started at the UN and being so heavily involved. And then, I guess sustainability probably wasn't a word we used back, years ago. It's probably really only it nearly feels like a modern term that we've only brought into society.
Yeah, so sustainable development is around a long time. It's around since I was in college in the early 90s, and it was that whole movement around what is sustainable development was part of why I wanted to become an environmental scientist and why I wanted to work in this area when I was, a teenager and a leaving cert student. But has it been ever like a top priority? Has it ever been the most important thing to business? Possibly not yet, but we have also had it in many different terms. We talk about responsible business, ethical business. For the last few years, climate was the most high profile part of the conversation on sustainability. But even if you go back in time to workers' rights and trade unions, that was also part of sustainability because it's around respect for the people within an organization. So yeah, it's certainly around a long time. Certainly as soon as I got a degree in it, it went right out of fashion and there wasn't a job to be had in it. So it's certainly more in particularly the consciousness of business and corporates now than ever before.
Before we talk maybe about the role that companies and businesses have to play, maybe we could talk a bit about us, the individuals, and what we can do.
Yeah, I'm really, really keen to find ways to help everybody play their part in sustainability and even to see themselves in the conversation. Because I think a problem is that sustainability is presented as being a green agenda for people who think green, vote green. And it's not. I mean, if you wake up every morning caring about the health and well-being of your family and the schools that your kids go to, the jobs you have, how much money you have in your pocket, you care about sustainability. They're all sustainability issues. So I wrote a book, How to Save Your Planet One Object at a Time, which was all about kind of demystifying sustainability by looking at everyday objects that are in your house, your garden shed, your gym bag, and helping people understand what the environmental impact of those things are and what it is that people can do. So really simple steps, just like our business Change by Degrees, like helping people make degrees of change and really trying not to be preachy about it. I think this sustainability world has suffered for a lot of preachiness and a need to be perfect. You don't need to be perfect. It's just about everybody finding changes they can make in their own life that ultimately should make it better for you.
And I guess, as you mentioned, guys, I think some people, there is kind of that fear there. I know there's kind of can sometimes be a bit of anxiety around it, and you're kind of like, am I doing this right? And I suppose it's just, as you mentioned, just doing the little things around the house. And you mightn't even realise that people are probably being sustainable and they don't even notice that they're doing it.
Yeah. And I mean, I think quite often that's a really good place to start with people. Like, you're probably doing things you aren't even giving yourself credit for. So if you're really careful about not wasting stuff, that's probably a pretty good sign that you're sustainable. So, all the men in the world can say, well, I'm hardly ever going out shopping for clothes. So look at me, I'm super sustainable. So they might be super sustainable on that side and not so much on another. But certainly, if you care about if you're interested in where things come from, if you ask curious questions, if you avoid wasting things, and I mean, that can even be energy. If you avoid wasting energy, then you are creating fewer carbon emissions. It's all connected.
It's interesting, you got me thinking there, like yesterday I happened to have a pair of shorts on and I was going, gosh, I've had these years, I really should replace them. And then I kind of thought, actually, no, I don't need to replace them. There's nothing wrong with them. They're just old, but they're still in good condition. So I think it's sometimes just kind of trying to maybe change our mindset.
Yeah. Like I remember when I was doing some of the promotion around the book and people were like, well, what's the most sustainable thing you can own? And I'm like, well, it's the thing you already own. So you're sure are perfectly sustainable. So anything you can own, that you can repair it, fix it, when you're finished with it, you're finished with those shorts, pass them on to somebody, sell them on Vinted. That keeps them in circulation, when they maybe are worn and can't go anywhere else, making sure they end up in the right bin in terms of like clothes recycling. That's important too. But everything we have, that's the most sustainable thing. So it's not about buying new stuff. It's not swapping out the old thing you have for something new, which feels and sounds and is marketed as being more sustainable. It's actually, the longer we can keep things in use, the better.
Yeah, and I think as well, isn't it, the cost per wear? I've talked about that before with friends, and it's like, if you buy something and the more you wear it, obviously it could end up being costing you like 20 cents to wear a day or something. So it's kind of like looking at the bigger picture of the items you already have.
Yeah, and I always say to women, like, look at us. We're dressed in plastic. Men are dressed in natural fibres quite often. Women's clothes are made with nylon and polyester. They're sweaty, they're horrible. It's literally being dressed in plastic. And why don't we get to wear the cottons and the wools and the natural fibres that men's clothes are made out of? So, and they're made out of those clothes because they buy fewer of them and they are expected to last. Whereas plastic clothes that we're supposed to wear once or twice and then discard. And that doesn't feel good. I don't want to be wearing plastic clothes. I feel like I'm worth more than that. So, it's just a reframe. Instead of like falling for the flashiest new thing, why don't we deserve the quality as well?
I never even thought of that. And now that you're saying it, I'm like, that is the reality actually every single day. Like, why should we have to wear plastic? And unfortunately, it's like, I find I go into shops now and I often my latest thing is not even checking the price. It's straight to the label to see what is this made of. And it might say wool, like a wool outfit. And then you look at it and it's actually like 5% wool and 95% polyester, and you're going, well, that's not wool, that's actually plastic.
Yeah, and then, when those clothes, when you wear them, they get smelly and sweaty faster, which means you have to wash them more. When you wash those kind of plastic-laced clothes in the washing machine, they release microplastics out into the environment. So, there's a simple thing. You could say, I'm just going to try and buy more clothes. When I do need new clothes, I'm going to buy them made from natural fibres. It depends what's interesting to you. So for some people, fashion might be the way into sustainability. For others, it might be that they love sea swimming and they really care about the ocean. For someone else, it might be because they're really interested in tech and innovation, and innovation is at the heart of all sustainability. So they might come in through that avenue. But everybody needs to find their own way in and know that there's a place for them. Nobody is going to judge you. No sane person is going to judge you for being interested in being more sustainable because you're not perfect. You're just welcome. Come on in. Take a step.
I remember one time someone said to me that, if you're trying to be more sustainable, start with like one room in the house. And they're like, start with the smallest room, like the small bathroom under the stairs, and then start with that and see how you get on. And I was like, that's actually a clever way to do it. So you can, make sure your bottles maybe are recyclable, or at least a small room is manageable. And it's a kind of a good tester into turning the whole house more sustainable.
Yeah. And it's about, the way of thinking about it is like, what do you spend money on? So focus on the things you spend most money on. So that could be something you absolutely don't see on a daily basis. It might be your pension. It might be your mortgage. It might be your car or your mode of transport. It might be your food shopping. But wherever those major expenditures are, it's stopping and thinking about those and thinking, all right, I spend a lot of money here. So this is an area of influence that I have.
Yeah.
So what could I change here? And so do you know where your pension is invested? Is it invested in oil and gas companies and arms and tobacco? Or is it invested in, green technology and a sustainable future? You have the right to ask those questions and to be curious. If your biggest expenditure is your house or your car, what's within your control, what's within your affordability there in order to be able to make sustainable choices or drive down the kind of running costs of the car or the house. That's other opportunities. But I think that's another way of looking at it as well, like where you're going to get most bang for your buck.
That's really fascinating about the pension, because I never even thought of that and never even thought about asking that question. And it just seems like something that is actually very doable, just to pick up the phone possibly. And that's a really good place, I think, for a lot of people to start.
Yeah. So where's your money invested? So pension funds invest in all kinds of things, good and bad. But you don't want your money, or I certainly don't want my pension money, being invested in oil and gas companies or in companies that are making and selling arms. That's not interesting to me. That's not where I want my money to go. And so you have every right to be curious and to change where your pension is invested if you want to.
Absolutely. Tara, tell us, of course, now about the company that you work with or work for, and I know you founded and you're involved in, and the work you do with companies.
Yeah, so Change by Degrees is on this same thing. It's about helping people, businesses and organizations make changes, get started, so that they can deliver on their sustainability goals. And in Change by Degrees, we're around now nearly 8 years. And in that time, I guess we've learned a lot about what holds businesses back in actually making the big ambitious goals that they set come true. And the key thing that people overlook all the time is the people. The human power to deliver goals. So people get all busy with setting strategic goals and buying in fancy like data platforms and hiring consultants to help them. And quite often they overlook the fact that their own people need to be engaged and informed and upskilled to change the way they do business and so that they can achieve their targets. And so we're all about the people in the business. And we're Change by Degrees is an online platform that businesses buy for their employees, so that whether their leadership team needs training and around how to be sustainability leaders, or whether their HR team needs to understand what their role is in sustainability, or their procurement team need to know how to buy sustainably and ethically. Whatever it is that you need, you find it all in one place with us. And so it's all about creating this human power that you need to actually turn goals into a reality.
It's great to see that so many companies want to be greener and want to have a more sustainable business.
Yeah, and many of them are kind of like, oh, I want to do, but I don't know where to start. Like, do I hire in someone to do it for me, or do I build the skills in our own team? And LinkedIn do great research on green jobs, and their research shows clearly is that demand for green skills is much greater than the availability of skills. So you can't just hire in people to solve the problem. You're actually going to have to build up the skills of the whole team. Also, you can't make an organization sustainable by having one head of sustainability. You have to change everybody's job.
Yeah. And
for those kind of businesses that are just getting started, we have content that they can learn how to write a sustainability plan. So, and embed that skill within the organization, or how to run a green team and make that successful. So we're aiming to have something there for lots of different types of organizations, whether they're well along the journey and they're quite mature, or they're just getting started.
Because I've quite a lot of friends who are teachers, and they often are involved in green schools, and like the work that schools have been doing for years now, it's been phenomenal. And I often say, like, when they tell me the projects they're working on, I was like, we could learn so much from what they're doing inside in the classroom.
Yeah, so Change by Degrees is born out of a conversation between me and Madeline Murray, my co-founder, out of frustration that her kids were being taught about sustainability in school through the Green Schools initiative, but nobody was teaching her and nobody was teaching other grown-ups and adults and people at work. So that led to Change by Degrees, this desire to give that same level of awareness and education to adults now, because we cannot wait for the kids to grow up to solve this problem. We need to take responsibility for it and be changing the way that we do business and lead our lives. So we simply cannot wait for the kids to grow up and solve the problem.
Yeah, I think it's often kind of comments where people are like, oh, sure, they're the future, they'll look after us. But as you mentioned, like, it's like, well, we could do something right now, like every single day, as soon as we step out of the studio, like we can start doing things and, making our day that little bit greener.
Yeah, greener, not even green, but more rainbow, beautiful, better for you, So it's so many people aren't interested in being green. You don't need to be green. I don't care if you're never green, okay? But it is about, if sustainability is going to be good for your pocket. It's good for your well-being. It's good for your mood, So it's got all these benefits in it for you, as well as doing it for the planet. So even if you don't care about the planet, which is kind of hard to do, I think, given that it's where we live, do it for yourself. There's loads of benefits just for you in living more sustainably, whether that's your saving money or you're improving your health or well-being.
Tara, you spoke about the activism work you've done, and can you just maybe explain more of that to us and how we can implement that into, I guess, saving the world?
Yeah, so I think activist is a term some people struggle with. Like, am I an activist or not? I think if you speak up for what you believe in, you're an activist. And so, again, a big element that's at the core of my book, but also the way we work in Change by Degrees, is that it's not just the action you take that is powerful. It's the stories that you tell about the actions that you take. It's sharing that is the big ripple effect that you have out into the world. So again, we're trying to create a reverse do you remember the R number from COVID?
Yes.
And it was like, if something had a big R number, it meant that it was more contagious and it went further. So we want to create positive R numbers of contagion, of sustainability, excitement and action. So it's really good if you, run a clothes swap with your friends, and you go away with a new outfit that you wouldn't have had otherwise. But even more powerful is when you and all your friends who had the clothes swap tell all your friends that you had this clothes swap and it was great and everybody was so excited because everybody went home with something new to wear. Now you're creating a ripple effect because everybody's infected by your excitement for the sustainability action that you took. So using your voice and your influence, whether that is to contact your local TD about something that's in your local community, or just most importantly, speaking to your family and friends, that is a huge impact. The people that are your loved ones and your friends, they trust you. They trust you more than they trust me, more than they trust the Taoiseach or Prime Minister or an academic. So the influence we have on those our friends and family is the biggest influence we have. So sharing our sustainability stories in a non-preachy way, just tell them the nice thing that you did, is a really, really massive impact that you can have.
And I think another thing that springs to mind then is kind of hope, and like hope for the future, and kind of being hopeful about the work that we're doing.
Yeah. So one of the biggest problems we have in the world of sustainability is we have told dreadful stories up until now. And hence, in all the time that I've worked on sustainability, the problems have been getting worse. We've had loads of data, loads of graphs, loads of statistics, amazing future scenarios around exactly what will happen that are all absolutely correct. Yet, despite having all of that information, we've told people terrible stories. We've told them doom and gloom stories. We've told them terrifying stories, but we haven't told them stories of hope and opportunity enough. Yeah. And so the stories that we tell and the way that we communicate about sustainability is massively important to bringing more people into the conversation and to creating that kind of hopeful, opportunity-led approach. So yeah, we need to get rid of all the sustainability jargon and acronyms. Come out and speak to people in plain English or whatever their language is around, there are real risks to us here, but there's also massive opportunities, and really focus in on the hope. People are much more motivated by hope than they are by doom and gloom and bad news.
Yeah, that is true, because I do find sometimes when when I even read or hear stuff and it kind of overwhelms me so much that I almost like shy away from something because I'm going, no, I'm just doing it wrong, so I'm just not going to do it at all. But I suppose, as you mentioned, if we can get the good messages out there and share the good stories, the community initiatives, like there's stuff going on all over the country that, are really kind of interesting and fun and engaging. So I think we need to push the narrative on those and get everyone to kind of, I guess, see the hopeful side of it.
Yeah. Like ultimately, sustainability is about more collaboration. It's about sharing. It's about innovation. It's about finding new, better ways of doing things. The only painful part of sustainability is about saying we're not going to do things the same way as we did in the past, and that we're not going to stick with business as usual. So if you're not scared of a better future, then sustainability is a no-brainer.
Absolutely. Now, Tara, before I let you go, what about yourself? What are your hopes for the future?
My hopes for the future are that human beings are as intelligent and creative as I think we are, and that we get out of our own way to allow all these wonderful things to happen. I think there are great ideas and initiatives bubbling up all around the world around these new and better ways of doing things. And sometimes the only thing stopping that is the wrong kind of policy or procedure or bureaucracy or vested interest of wealthy companies that don't want things to change. But, underlying all of that is all this human potential to do things different and better. And I do believe that as human beings, we will see that we can find a better way of doing things. So the past does not have to determine our future.
Like Tara, Sharon has built her career around sustainability, so let's hear what she has to say. So Sharon, tell us about your role with ESB and also how you got into it, because I know you've got actually a really interesting career path.
Thanks, Meghann. So my role in the ESB is Group Head of Sustainability, and it's a relatively new role. It was created about a year or so ago, and I'm the first person to actually take up that role in ESB. It's a new role, but I suppose ESB has, always been operating in a sustainable way, and there's always been sustainability linked roles. But over the last 12 months, we have created this, I suppose, new establishment to really professionalise and inculcate sustainability in the organisation. But previous to taking up the role in ESB, I worked in the Defence Forces, and I worked in the Irish Defence Forces for 27 years.
Wow.
Yeah, I joined when I was 18.
Oh my God.
And I would have done an army cadetship in the Curragh. Was commissioned as an army officer in the artillery corps, actually. But when we had an opportunity to go to university, I studied civil engineering and then joined the Corps of Engineers in the Defence Forces. So ostensibly, most of my career has been as an engineer corps officer in the Defence Forces, and really that means working between the combat engineering side of the house. Combat engineering meaning like overseas deployments, helping troops move across bridges, building bridges, blowing up bridges if you have to, clearing obstacles, etc., etc. But the other side of it is the traditional engineering type role, so civil, mechanical, building lands, roads maintenance, that type of thing. And it was on some of my overseas deployments, particularly one year where I went from working in Liberia in West Africa, and then 6 months later I found myself working in Kosovo and went from, I suppose, a almost 50 degree temperature to a minus 20 degree temperature in the 1 year. And in those environments where we're trying to construct and maintain camps for the troops on the ground, a big part of that is the microgrid, the electricity generation and production and transmission around the camp for all of the services. And the challenges that the heat and the extreme weather had on the electricity production just made me think, there has to be a better way to do this, beautiful sunshine, heat, etc., etc. So when I returned from Kosovo in, I think it was 2006, I decided to do a master's in sustainable energy engineering. And having done that in the Defence Forces, then I became the de facto Defence Forces energy manager. And then this brought me on a whole journey into the world of sustainability and what that meant for armed forces. I ended up working in Brussels for a number of years with the European Defence Agency and the European Commission, essentially looking at the European energy directives and how they would apply to armed forces and essentially doing the same work that I was doing in Ireland, but at a European level. And learning so much about like what sustainability actually means for this sector. And it means so much for every sector, but we don't always think about that when we're in our own sector, So people are always surprised when they hear that we looked at energy and sustainability in a defence context.
That's absolutely incredible. Like, did you ever think going in at 18 years of age to the Defence Forces that it would lead you to have such an incredible career and, bring you to sustainability?
Absolutely not. I mean, when I was joining the Defence Forces, I mean, all I wanted to do was play sport, run around, shoot guns, have adventures. I definitely wanted to travel and go to other countries. And I love the idea of peacekeeping and UN operations. And as an 18-year-old, that's about as much as I knew. But it very quickly became apparent to me that, I suppose the defence world is very much a microcosm of society and that there are so many roles, etc., in the Defence Forces. But it also became very apparent very quickly that, Defence Forces, being that microcosm of society, also have to be, extremely resilient, have to be able to operate autonomously. And energy security and national security are so inextricably linked. And that kind of strategic approach to energy and understanding where Ireland gets its energy from and looking at the complications around that and the security concerns around that, like, it's a fascinating topic. And I suppose through my career then, I started to really appreciate how important the national grid was to all of our activities at home and the intricacies of electricity generation, transmission, distribution, the supply side, the single electricity market, all of that I found really fascinating. So I suppose I came to a natural point in my career where, I started to realise that the plans that that I would have had in terms of climate action for the Defence Forces were very much dependent on the decarbonisation of the grid to reach that some of those net zero objectives. So when I saw this role advertised in ESB, I thought, wow, what an opportunity! What a great place to work and to be able to have some impact upstream of where I had been before. And yeah, it's been fantastic. I'm actually just a year and a day in the role today, actually. So it's been fantastic so far.
And with your new role in ESB, like, what exactly does that look like?
So it's a very broad role. And I'll be honest, to a certain extent, I'm still figuring that out. And I think the organisation is still figuring that out. But at the moment, the role effectively kind of breaks down into three main pillars. And the first pillar is, driving out sustainability actions in the organisation. So, we don't just talk about sustainability. There's a very clear, very ambitious target to be net zero by 2040. And I suppose that's very much the climate action part of the strategy. But in getting to net zero by 2040 and all of the key milestones that have to be reached along that journey, there's also a sustainability piece that needs to be nested in. So it's not enough to reach net zero. We've got to do that in a sustainable way. And that net zero objective has to be sustainable in itself. So quite a lot in that pillar and in driving out sustainability actions across people activities, the circular economy and resource use, biodiversity, and some other climate-related actions. The second pillar then is about inculcating sustainability as a concept within the organisation. ESB has always been sustainable. It has always acted in many intents and purposes in a sustainable way. But sustainability means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And it's about getting a common understanding within the organisation of what sustainability is, ultimately the ability to sustain. And there's a lot of learning and development in that. There is a lot of communication around that. There is a lot of buy-in around that. And also a lot of change, so change management is a big part of that pillar as well. People have to consider different aspects now in their decision making, in their projects, in their programmes, in funding them, in designing them, etc. So big part of that learning and development. And building the capacity in the organisation. And then the third pillar is about our performance. Like, how do we measure our performance? How are we doing in sustainability? Everyone is familiar, I think, with ESG reporting, environmental social governance reporting, and there's a whole alphabet soup around that, which I won't bore the listeners with. But there are some very onerous, EU and other reporting mechanisms that we not only must adhere to, but we want to adhere to, because we can demonstrate our performance through those. So there's the third pillar is around the structures and processes to do that.
It's fascinating, and it just seems like there's so much to it. But it looks like I guess, is it kind of clearer then when you have like a 2040 goal?
Well, it certainly helps, that's for sure, because, you have the whole organisation, and it's a big organisation. I mean, I don't think I even realised how big it was myself before I moved into it. You have the generation side, you have the whole trading function, buying and selling of commodities. You have the whole distribution network, and also the maintenance of the transmission network. You have, that's substations, you have smart meters, and then on the customer solution side, you have Electric Ireland. So the providers of electricity and gas to customers, both residential and commercial and industrial. You also have the EV charging network and telecoms and et cetera, et cetera. So there's a huge amount of activity that ESB is engaged in, and not just on the island of Ireland, but also Northern Ireland networks. So it's a very broad, has a huge footprint, and I suppose it is what it is. It's a vertically integrated utility.
That's what I was just thinking there when you were saying and explaining about all the work that ESB do and all the networks and everything involved. I was like, I never really sat down and kind of thought about, if you're leading the way, I guess, with the work you're doing, you are effectively bringing us all with you, because you mentioned like you're lighting up our homes, you're lighting up our businesses, you're almost paving the way for us and maybe making other companies more sustainable without them even realising it.
Yeah, well, it's a huge enabler, I suppose. Everybody in Ireland is essentially a customer of ESB in one form or another. So ESB obviously has a quite a large capacity in terms of energy generation. It's approximately 25 to 30%, capacity. There are obviously other generation companies out there as well. And we're also, a large supplier of customers through Electric Ireland. But there are other competitors in that space as well. But we are the only grid management entity in the country on the whole island of Ireland for distribution. And so that's a really significant role and a huge responsibility. But there's been great progress made over the last number of years. And I suppose this is something that I think it's important for us not to lose sight of. A number of years ago, there was no solar production, for example, in Ireland. And having come from, almost a standing stop, there's over 1.5 gigawatts of installed solar capacity in Ireland now. And that includes over 100,000 connections to the grid since 2020. Like, that's a significant uplift, and you hear some negativity sometimes around the pace of change in this space, but when you look at a stat like that, that's incredible. And it will come a time when every single roof in Ireland will have solar installed. And I suppose another thing that, as an average consumer a number of years ago, I wouldn't have realised is that the renewable energy capacity that is generated in Ireland at the moment actually exceeds our peak demand. So we've made great strides. Now, it obviously, you don't always have that renewable energy capacity available when you want it to meet that peak demand. But when you can see those numbers starting to balance out and start to exceed the demand, we're on the right track. But the technology and the backup services and I suppose the prediction of the weather patterns and getting the most out of that renewable energy capacity they're the challenges, and they're the things that have to be dealt with as we move towards 2040.
Like, I've never realised how much attention I've started paying to people's roofs in the last couple of months, because I'm like, oh, they got solar panels. Oh, they got solar panels. But I want to talk to you more on a kind of personal level, because I know in your own community you've been involved with some initiatives. So could you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so I live in a small village called Lawrencetown in East Galway. So, a Galway woman like yourself, although I did originally grow up in Athlone, but I feel like a native now in Galway. And Lawrencetown Development Group, a very active community development group, since about 2016 have, worked really hard with the entire community to, put a lot of I suppose, rural and community development initiatives in place. And these range from a new playground to new school car parking, walking tracks, etc. All of the things the services that were needed in a small rural village. And I suppose along that journey, we also decided to become a sustainable energy community, an SEC, which is supported by SEAI, Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland. And this has been a super journey as well. So in becoming a sustainable energy community, you were supported in terms of developing what's called an energy master plan. It sounds very grand, but in essence, it's looking at your community and seeing where can you improve energy efficiency or install renewables to offset the use of fossil fuels. And we, I suppose, over the years have managed to get a complete refurbishment on the local national school, which brought up to, I think it's an A3 rating with heat pump technology to heat the school now. You know, previous to that, there was condensation rolling down the walls in the middle of winter. It was freezing. It was fully insulated and also PV on the roof. We developed a new after-school childcare building, also extremely energy efficient, heat pump technology as well. So created a whole new service for after-school kids and employment in the community. And we also looked at installing a water font in the centre of the village beside the playground to alleviate use of plastic bottles, water butts for rainwater harvesting, composting for the grass cuttings around the village during the summer months. And I'm sure lots of other things as well that I just can't recall right now.
Do you know, for such a rural area too, because I'm from a rural parish, I should add GA rivals, but you know, it is incredible to see. I think small communities are really great for rallying together and getting behind initiatives too, which I think is always really important to see. And people are probably listening right now going, you know what, we actually don't do anything in our community, and we could and we should. But like, how do they get started? Like, how do they kind of, you know, how do you make that a reality?
So I suppose, look, there's no one size fits all, and there's no playbook necessarily for this, but there are loads of resources, and there are loads of ways of going about this. I suppose first of all, you need, you know, a few people who have an interest in this space, not necessarily sustainability. You know, it's a big term, but I don't know anyone who isn't interested in nature or anyone who doesn't like nature. You know, everyone likes going for a walk. Everyone likes to have a nice, vista to look at when they're going for a walk or in their local community. So I think, you know, it's a little bit like tidy towns. It's a little bit like being part of your local GA club or your rugby club or your cricket club or whatever it is. You know, if you find one or two like-minded individuals and start to discuss, you know, what would we like to see happen around here? And it could be something really small, like a corner of a community field that or a pitch in a GA club that is unused, where wildflowers could be planted. I've seen this in a local GA club near me, and it's absolutely beautiful. And also the pollination that it brings, the bees and the butterflies in the summer, it's absolutely beautiful. You know, even in ESB, we are looking at, we have a footprint, I suppose, in so many parts of the country, you know, almost every field in the country, huge amount of lands in which we operate, and then another amount of lands that we actually control. And there's often a lot of dead ground, you know, where you have substations or where you have transmission lines. And, you know, the networks business unit and the generation business unit are, you know, really looking at some small tangible projects whereby you might have heard of the term the hare's corner, the corner of the field that the farmer can't use. You know, it's an awkward angle, and using that to rewild or to plant wildflowers. And just small projects like that to get started. If you do one or two of those in your local community, you know, you tend to get a little buzz out of it. I would say on a more practical level that there are sustainable energy coordinators in every province and in every county in the country that work for Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland, and they're a fantastic resource for setting up a sustainable energy community. So look, lots from the macro right down to the micro. But I think that the first port of call is, first of all, to reach out. And secondly, within your own local area to, as I said, get one or two like-minded people and start to do anything. Plant something, you know, apply for something. There's so many grants, so many opportunities out there to go on that sustainability journey.
So that's it for this week's episode of Re-Energize. A huge thanks to our guests. Don't forget to subscribe and spread the word about the show. We'll see you in 2 weeks for the next episode.
This podcast was produced and recorded by the Podcast Studios for ESB. Production and editing by Connor Reid. Project management by Katie Flannery. Original music by Dan Wilcox. Video editing by Judy Hassett. Graphics and design by Matt Mahon.